So we're live. Welcome to my LinkedIn Live. I'm Nadine Paris, executive and leadership coach and mediator, and I live in the beautiful home county of Surrey.
Hi, my name's Jenny Ling. I'm a facilitator and leadership development consultant, and I live on the borders of Newcastle and Northumberland in the north of England.
I'm Jan Daines, and I'm based in Gloucestershire in the UK. And I think the thing I'd like you to know about me is I have a healthy lack of reverence for authority, which I wish I used to help stop interrupting, which I use to help leaders and organisations improve.
I'm Nick Sheriff. I'm a school inspector and education consultant, and I live and work in Dubai.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to everybody who is watching us around the world. I want to put this LinkedIn Live today into a bit of a context. And back in August 2020, when I was thinking of applying for LinkedIn Live, I had no idea how much this LinkedIn Live application would actually test my resilience. And there are two kinds of thoughts here, and Nick is smiling because he knows what I'm going to say. So on one hand, I had little conversations in myself where telling me there are 706 million LinkedIn users, Nadine, you just cannot mess that up. And it's very difficult to not mess something up when you don't know about it. So we are streaming with StreamYard, and I didn't know anything about StreamYard, so I had to learn. And I was thinking, what if people are not interested? What if people don't find it particularly, they can't take anything from it? Or what if I don't have any impact? And for people who know me, not having an impact is really a tragedy, particularly when I invest myself so much. And on the other hand, I had that little voice in myself who thought, well, actually, what a great opportunity to share thinking, share perspective, share views, engage people from all over the world, have a voice, speak up, grow an international network. So what I've learned from that is that resilience can be tested by adversity, and it can be also tested by positive changes, which is exactly where I was when I started my LinkedIn Live. So then I thought, let's talk about resilience. And here we are today. So thank you to the three of you for being here with me today to reflect on resilience.
What a pleasure.
Thank you.
Maybe it's worth starting and maybe covering some early ground, some sort of definitions and ideas maybe of what resilience is. Because when I was looking at it, it seemed rather clear. And then I came across this other word called metal, as in the test of somebody's metal.
Oh, metal.
And it's different. So I think, just to sort of put it out there, metal is someone's character, a person's strength, their fortitude, their courage with dealing with hardship, the ability to take on a challenge, to persevere without giving up, using a resolve. The fatal difference is, though, that could end up breaking you, which is why it's not resilience. You can throw yourself at these things with tremendous bravery and courage, but that's not resilience. Resilience is that amazing football term from the 90s on Soccer AM, which is bounce back ability.
Yes.
You have to come back from the adversity. And I think that's the main difference. They talk about words like recover after a system failure, a reset. The difference between the oak falling over in a storm and the little reed bending in the wind and still being there afterwards with the same roots and foundations. So I thought it'd be good maybe just to lay that down as a start point.
Yeah. And before we just move on, I just want to share something, because what I've got here, I'm often asked if we are rehearsing this LinkedIn Live, and we're not. So what I'm going to do is I've got this prepared for anybody who wants that, and I'm going to be writing some ideas down so that at the end of the session, then people can take away some ideas. So Nick, you've just said that resilience is our ability to bounce back.
Yes.
And you know, how can people bounce back when sometimes they feel like they're at the end of they're at the end of what they can do. They can't do anymore. They're just stuck there. They've had enough. They're at their lowest of the lowest. How can people bounce back?
I think just to say bounce back is a cumulative term for lots of other things that happen that mean you're then in the bounced back position. Yes. Another definition that I liked was someone wrote the capacity to navigate and negotiate our own personal resources. And I think that's a bit more useful because it sort of suggests you've got some tools. You need to start deploying the tools, and they help towards creating a bounce back ability for a particular situation. I mean, what do you guys think?
Do you think that people, I mean, do you think that every single person has their own tools in themselves to bounce back?
No.
Well, go on, Jenny. No, go, Jenny. Go.
I think, sadly, I think that's not so. Or they may have the tools, but they don't recognize them or utilize them. And I think that with resilience comes a certain amount of self-awareness, and the self-awareness of the situation which you need to bounce back from, and acknowledging this is a bad situation, and looking to how you can move on from that. But I think very sadly, you see, and I'm seeing some people at the moment quite close by here who are just haven't got the equipment and are becoming so overwhelmed by the negativity that they're finding it difficult to bounce out of that negativity, because it is a downward spiral. And I think the further down the spiral you get, the more difficult it is to bounce back. So I think that it would be lovely if we all had that equipment, and perhaps deep down we all do, but I think that some people find it harder to access than others. And I think what we're hoping to do today perhaps is give some tips about how you can access that more effectively.
John, what did you want to say?
Well, the thing I was going to say, I mean, it actually follows on quite nicely from that. It was, and just to go back to your question, do we all possess that skill? I mean, I think there's a nature versus nurture aspect to this, as maybe there is for a lot of things. And I guess, you know, we maybe have an innate amount of natural resilience, which maybe comes from our genetic makeup. You know, I haven't studied this, but I'm just sort of suggesting. However, I think that mostly, so on the nature nurture continuum, I think it's probably mostly a learned thing. Whether it's an intentionally learned thing, or whether it's learned because you've had a pretty rough time and and sort of emerged from it. So I think we are equipped with a sort of innate level of resilience because of who we are and where we come from, but that the knocks and scrapes and experiences we have through our life then add to that and turn us into the, you know, more resilient person that we perhaps work towards. There you go.
I picked up a couple of things there. One is deep down we all do, which Jenny said, and then this notion that you can learn it. Interestingly, some scientists describe it as a failure of systems, that you do have, from an evolutionary sense, systems to deal with adversity. And they are things like we're predisposed to attach to relationships. We have a learning and thinking brain. We have neural cognitive control systems. We have religion, spirituality, culture, education, community. But they talk about that those systems can get hijacked by the adversity, and then they don't work for us. So I think you're right. I think we've got these things innately, but we don't yet maybe see quickly enough when they're being hijacked by a situation, and then, you know, maybe we've not got the tools to deal with that hijacking.
But Jenny earlier on mentioned self-awareness, and I think that certainly the best leaders I've worked with have developed great sense of self-awareness and are able to reflect on their core components of what is their own resilience. And when we ask them, they're able to pinpoint those core components. I have done that exercise myself when I was a head teacher, particularly at the beginning of my headship, because I wasn't quite prepared for it, and PQ doesn't really prepare you. Well, certainly when I did it at that time, it didn't prepare me. And there was a point in my first year where I thought, all I'm doing is dealing with problems after problems. Leadership is a very lonely place. And I was struggling because everything was coming to me, and I didn't have a system in myself to make it work. And my coach at the time said to me, well, what opportunity is that giving you? And it gave me an opportunity to start self-reflecting and being a lot more aware of those components which were making me a resilient, well, it was going to start to make me a more resilient leader. And there were three things for me. The first one was perception. So it was all about how I was looking at difficulties, and instead of thinking, well, that's a completely, crippling event that is happening here, I was just seeing it as a difficulty. The second one was about the responsibility. So, I'm responsible for my own thinking. So I choose the way I think, and therefore it's linked to perception. And the third one was control. And in terms of control, it was more about spending my energy on what I knew I could control, and therefore starting to grow from there. So for me, it did help me understand who I was and having clear components of what my resilience was made of. And then I could navigate that. And I've always talked about perception. So, but that's just, I'm just giving an example here, a practical example.
We've had a comment from Craig. It's good to see you've joined us, Craig, which I think is relevant at this moment, because Craig is just asking us whether emotional resilience is a different thing from what we've actually been talking about, or is it essentially the same? I mean, he uses different words, but I've kind of, hopefully, Craig figured that into a coherent.
It's a good point, really, because given 100 people in the same circumstances, they all would react differently. Some without resilience, some with resilience, different kinds, and that would manifest itself differently. It might be worth sort of just going over, like what happens, what resilience is, just before we get into the traits. So our human brain wants to stay in something called homeostasis, which is normality. And when it gets outside of that, it panics a little, and that's that adversity. Interestingly, it doesn't have to be a negative. We used to have professional golfers, when they started to play really well and the numbers were very different to what they're used to, do you know what? They panicked exactly the same way as their numbers were when they were below it. It just felt different.
Interesting.
But I think once you get this adversity from homeostasis, then you end up, the research is saying, 4 outcomes. The worst outcome is you end up with dysfunctional reintegration. You can't get past it. And that's what resilience does to you. Then you come back with a certain amount of reintegration, but with a loss. There's something missing from the experience. Then the normal one is I come back to homeostasis and I carry on. But there's another one, which I found, and this is called resilient integration or post-traumatic growth, thriving post-adversity. That some people can take that experience, not only come back to normal, but they move on and they use it to their betterment. They grow from that experience.
I think you're That's really interesting, and I think what you've just said is spot on. And as you were starting to go through those 4 things, I was kind of waiting for the last one, because I really believe that. And you know, those who are better equipped to deal with this use it in a positive way. So that and so it can. And I believe that we have bits knocked off us, and we're shaped as we go through our life. And one of the best outcome for that is to use those experiences, not to let them completely crush us and destroy us, but actually to emerge stronger from. I've seen that on several occasions. Yeah.
I think we talked about that, didn't we? Kind of, we've talked about that before. Is that there are. I think most of us in our careers, I mean, we've all got fairly long careers behind us, some of us longer than others. And in those careers, we've had fairly significant challenges that we've all had to deal with. And I think that having gone through a real emotional and career challenge, I found I didn't feel very resilient because of the way I was feeling at the time. But once I kind of got back on the horse and realized, actually, no, that situation isn't going to define who I am. And the only way I can prove that is by being successful in my term. So I think that knock that I had personally enabled me to become more resilient, because I felt that my response to it wasn't as strong as it could have been. And I think that had the same thing happened now, I would be in a much better position, because I'm more self-aware and have a better toolkit, and perhaps a bit better self-awareness of who I am as well.
But Jenny, how did you overcome? Did you just? I mean, you didn't wake up one day thinking, "I've got it now. I understand everything. I totally get how I am." How did you find out? I mean, did you work with somebody? What was the mechanisms that you put in place?
I think my immediate reaction to that is probably the right one, and I think it's about listening to the positive voices, drown out the negative voices. And I think that it's very easy for somebody, if somebody says something negative to you, to take it to heart. But if somebody says something positive to you, you think, oh, well, no, not really. And I think that I had to seek feedback and listen to the positivities and build and almost reframe the view I had of myself from that.
I think that's it. One of the things that comes through all the research is this notion of relationships and this sense of community. That the better relationships you've got, that group of people, like you said, the ones you want to listen to, who may not give you always positive feedback, but it comes from a positive place because they want you to do better. Because one of the other things is about being realistic. But I think there are that. I don't know whether we're talking about the skills, because I think you can build a skill set that then helps you be better equipped for resilience. But there are some other things which you probably could call like outlooks. One is like that your self-perception. How do you view yourself? Can I get myself out of a situation, or am I totally beholden externally? The relationships one I sort of mentioned, but then the situation one. Being genuinely realistic about what you can and what you can't do. I mean, no one is saying everyone can get through COVID-19, because I don't think anybody ever planned for that. So some things are almost, it's sensible to say, look, I haven't got an answer, because you're not meant to have an answer. Doesn't mean you're any less. And then the last one is this notion of that I keep picking up, which is purposeful and meaningful. Your life means something, and therefore the development of you as a person you see as being valuable. Those aren't skills, but they are sort of outlooks on how you see the world and yourself.
But it's interesting what you say, Nick, about being realistic about what you can and what you can't do, because sometimes if we are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, we tend to look at the glass is half empty, as opposed to half full. So if you give a piece of paper and on left hand side what you can do, and then right hand side what you can't do, sometimes people might have one column that is that has much more in it than the other column, and then you take them on another day, and then actually it can be quite different. So for me, this is a live document, that we should be working on almost every day, because things change, and we can use different colors, doing it in different ways, but just to grow that list, so that what we can do can change, because every day we change, we learn. I mean, us four, 6 months ago, we were in Dubai. We had no idea that today we would be on LinkedIn Live using StreamYard, and we had no idea, and we have more skills. So things we can do today that we couldn't do just 6 months ago.
It's also keeping track of the positive, isn't it? Because at the moment it's coronavirus is everywhere, and the words and the news and everything else. And then at the end of the news, sometimes you get a good news item. And I think that unfortunately that we're being pushed into focusing on the negativity. And I think that the positives that have come out of this, that we've talked about in previous LinkedIns, in terms of people's relationships, in terms of people communing with nature, getting out there, building relationships with family, having more time to do the things that they want to do. So I think it's keeping that, reflecting on both what Nick and Nadine said, it's keeping that focus on the good things and being optimistic. And I think that it's easier said than done, because if you're in that downward spiral that we talked about earlier, and somebody says, oh, you need to be optimistic and look at all the good things you've got, that can be really challenging. And I think I feel it's incumbent on me to kind of try and flip things whenever I can, to say, oh, this bloody thing, it's going to go on another 6 weeks, and and I said, yeah. So I try to flip that so that people are looking at the benefits. I can't do it so well in my own head, because I think that's much more difficult. I think it's much easier to do it with other people.
John?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, again, it's funny how this happens. We're joined by Jeremy, which is great. Jeremy, thank you very much. And you've put something really, really interesting there, which picking up on I can't remember who it was. Someone was talking about leaders in organizations who are only interested in, this is what Jeremy is saying, and one of us was talking about being surrounded by people who don't ever give us anything. It was Nick, because he was talking, sorry, it's sounding a bit garbled, this, but I'm remembering as I'm speaking.
That's tricky.
Yeah, no, it was about you're saying that as we don't often hear the negatives. We just hear things which are positive, and actually, in terms of growing and becoming more resilient and helping to move us on, that fourth category you mentioned, it is really important, and it taps into what you were just saying there, Jenny, to have people that you know and trust around you, and if you're a leader, people being able to trust those dissenting voices, if you like, the plants in the organization who think completely differently and will make a suggestion to you, which isn't along the lines of what you want to hear necessarily, or even what they think you want to hear, but it's designed to move. Well, it's not designed to, but it has the effect of moving you on and developing you. Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for prompting that. I think that's really important.
Jeremy is in Dubai, actually, very close to you, Nick.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. But it's interesting that Jeremy mentioned trust, because actually over the past 6 months, we, and I have seen it, have accelerated the trust that we have with the right people for ourselves. Certainly the four of us, we have accelerated that trust, and that has certainly contributed, for sure, in my case, to building my own resilience with what's happening in the world, tapping into the trusted friends, the trusted colleagues, and the family as well. So trust is absolutely key when you want to openly talk about your own resilience and, you know, not being afraid to be vulnerable and say things as they are.
That's the difference. Sorry.
That's a good point. I was going to jump in on the back of Jenny's bit about, you know, you can be worried. You're not going to get it right all the time. But if you don't listen to the right people, it can look very negative. And then you said vulnerability. Now, what often resilience can, I think, inadvertently look like is you have to stand out the front and put yourself in that vulnerable position. That's not true. If you remember when we were doing distance learning, somebody said, they read something that said Maslow before Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I was researching resilience, another Maslow thing. Apparently, resilient people don't do the pyramid. They turn the pyramid upside down.
Ah, brilliant.
Because they realize they don't need to have absolutely everything to start helping and affecting other people. They'll help with whatever they've got, which I thought was really cool.
Well, I can't not jump in at this, because that's one of my big things, that actually. And I think there's a faith aspect to that, which is that if you find your purpose, this doesn't apply to children, which is often how Maslow is used, but I think it applies to a certain other. I think this is fascinating. If you find your purpose, this is the thinking. So if you have that pyramid upside down, purpose is at the bottom, then everything else, including warmth, shelter, food, water, whatever those are on the very basic tier, which are now at the top, they will just follow on, because you found your purpose in life, and therefore you will be sustained. There you go.
Yeah, Simon Sinek's Finding Your Why, isn't it?
Do you know what?
The same thing.
I don't normally follow him, but today I just,
I think he's wonderful.
He said this thing that I thought, about thinking about things differently. He said he went for a run, did a 5K with a friend of his, and they both finished. And at the end, there was free bagels.
Oh, yes, I saw that.
Do you see that? And he says, "Oh, let's get some bagels." And his friend says, No, I'm not queuing up. He said, No, they're free bagels. Queue up. He said, No, I'm not. No. And he says, "Isn't that weird? He could see the goal and what it was, and the other person could only see the problem in getting to the goal."
Yes.
Yes.
Which one was resilient?
It's perception, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always.
It's back to what I said at the very beginning. I mean, perception can actually, it can send you in a very specific direction that is not always right.
But I think other things like, I mean, even Tony Blair said it. I remember I was doing some outdoor education, and we were talking about risk, and he supported us to say, look, kids need to feel and perceive risk, even if it's only perceived risk, because life will be risky, they need to deal with it. And there is something about being resilient that means you don't avoid risk, that you need to bump up against it, get a feeling of what it's like in order for you to take on maybe greater risks, like, you know, getting through a COVID pandemic. But some guy said, I think I see it there for talking about that resilience is not necessarily innate, it can always be improved. I think that's probably right. You can always get better at it. Absolutely. But I would say, though, that the whole point of this is that you can't tackle it on your own. You can be resilient, but I'm not sure everybody can develop their resilience on their own. They need some sort of external system, you know, culture, religion, other people, family, in order for that to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Mahmoud is actually my accountant. He's just an amazing guy, and he did a LinkedIn Live last week on resilience himself. So I'm really pleased that he's listening. Hello, Mahmoud, and thanks for listening. Yes, I don't know what I wanted to say. Nick, you've just said something, and I've just lost the thread because I wanted to say thank you to
taking risk.
Yes,
taking risk.
Yes, it's about taking risk, but it's also about talking to people, you were saying. And, you know, right now, we've all done our maps of who we can talk to, you know, the friends, the family, the colleagues as well. I mean, we're having very different conversations with colleagues and clients at the moment. And I guess, you know, everything is an opportunity to improve your resilience. Every conversation is an opportunity to improve your resilience. I feel very strongly about that. Tasneem is saying something, Jan?
Yes, she is, and then it disappeared. Whilst I find it,
I've got it here.
The only way out is through.
Yeah, she's agreeing with Nick, isn't she, Tasneem?
Tasneem is in Dubai as well. Hello, Tasneem.
Yeah,
Hi,
the
Tasneem.
only way out is through. I mean, I think there's a lot in that. No, go on, Jenny.
Sorry, I'd just like to pick up something that Craig's talking about people with undiagnosed autism, ADHD, and generally people with additional needs, because I think that from my own experience, I've seen a number of special needs children and adults, and the resilience that they show just going through normal everyday experiences is astounding. And I think that people who haven't got these extra challenges have no idea what other people are having to do just to get out of bed, get their clothes on the right way round, negotiate all the obstacles that they might fall over. And I think that if you weren't resilient in those circumstances, you would crumble. And I think resilience is so important as a cornerstone for people with additional needs, but also for all children. And I think that if somehow that we can, we all have an ex-head teacher background, and I think that within schools, resilience is one of the most important things we can help our young people to develop, because without resilience, it's been said in some of the reading that I was doing, and I totally agree, is that it's more important than anything else is resilience. It's more important than character. It's more important than qualifications. Because if you haven't got resilience, the slightest thing, going back to Nick's analogy about the oak tree, the slightest thing will fell you. Whereas if you have that resilience, you're able to sort of drift and wave in the wind without it becoming an issue. But I would just like to hold up my hand for these kids who struggle so much against physical or cognitive disabilities.
Well, before we lose that, I just want to bung in something. And and their parents. I feel really strongly for that, and maybe broaden it to those who care for anyone who's been through a difficult, whether it's a stroke or some sort of palsy or something. Those people themselves, but also those around them who are then thrown. Their world is completely changed, and failing isn't an option. Actually, you've got to.
Just giving up.
No, exactly. You've got to find a way through. Anyway.
Thanks, John.
A shout out to those people, yeah.
Jan, do you want to pick up on what Jeremy has said?
Yeah, okay, I can do. So Jeremy is saying it's weird how resilience seems to erode as we age. Yeah, I mean it's fascinating, that, isn't it? That when we're younger, and this point that Jeremy's making, we seem to be able to navigate our way through and accept things. And then when we get older and more brittle, it is an interesting comment. I think it's to do with attitude, and a lot of the things you could call that mindset. I think that's essentially the same thing. A lot of things we've talked about have been sort of dancing around the edges of attitude and mindset, and linking that with the conversation we had a little while ago. Is this nature or nurture? Well, at the start of our nurturing, and in fact the start of our naturing, when we're little, the experiences we have set us up for life. And so, just to pick Jeremy's point there, when you're younger, you're definitely at a point where you can cope with more, because you kind of haven't learned to be sophisticated and cover things up. So there's an honesty and a vulnerability to what you do and the way you go about it, which I think actually is important in developing these skills and attitudes for life.
Although I would say, I think the difference between young and old is this notion of the fear of failure. When you're older, you got a lot more baggage. Failure is a bit more close to you. Most kids come from a decent family, and win or lose, no one cares, and that's taught to them by lots of their, significant others, shall we say. Although I would say there are kids, because I was doing my research, those that I've got terrible backgrounds, growing up in war and famine and things like that, actually they can't deal with it, that they need the support network, because those sorts of things no one's meant to be resilient and get through. And which is terrible. I mean, there is what I wanted to try and get to was this notion of okay, so what then? So there's things out there and you can be resilient, but I think it needs us to change something. What are you going to change in order to make sure you're resilient, and how can you do that? And I read something about the brain, which I hadn't worked out, and because I thought that the brain stopped growing new cells, and it doesn't. It keeps going, and by the end of the podcast, apparently we get a 1 cell every 2 minutes. So you've got more brain cells by the end of the podcast than when you started. And there's this thing called neuroplasticity, and that's forming new connections. And you keep doing that. And we've got 100 billion neurons in our brain. So the opportunity is what I'm getting at for you to rewire yourself, think differently, is huge. And that's the same in all of us. So, it's not like this is unique. This can be done.
It's that neuroplasticity. Whether we've got more brain cells at the end of the session than we had at the start depends on how many of them have died in between. Sure. The rate of death compared with the rate of growth. But
it depends how much football you're playing, I suppose.
How many times you headed the ball. I completely agree with neuroplasticity. I've always thought it was to do with neural pathways and being able to access and develop and enhance those, rather than.
I mean, in terms of resilience, it's a bit like a skill, isn't it? The more you attenuate the pathway, that myelin production, you can really attenuate that signal. You can get an amazingly efficient response. But I almost wanted to prove people, we all have the tools. It's not beyond any of us to learn this stuff.
I think we have to feel that, don't we? No, sorry, I can't see you, Jenny, because there's a.
I know, I'm still here. Can I pick you up on something there, Nick? Because what you were comparing the kids who come from reasonable backgrounds, etc., and everything's fine, and they don't perhaps need resilience so much, and then you get the people who've got the tough environment who do need it but may not have it.
Not they need it. That I think when you're younger, there is a less sense of the fear of failure from lots of things. But I think there are situations where it's not about the fear of failure. It's the environment is so terrible for some people that they need external help. I think adults seem to think they don't need help because they can do it all because they're grown up.
Right.
And we tend to think children can't do it on their own because they're children and we need to help them. And I probably would say that the reality is somewhere in between.
I misunderstood what you said.
Okay, well, I'll just add to that. I think the toughness of background that you're mentioning is nothing to do with affluence.
No,
it is to do with that emotional. It's to do with love, effectively, at home, I suspect. Is that what? Yeah. You happy with that?
I think fear of failure is your exam results. Going home with a D. You can be from a poor family, a rich family. Some children, that's difficult. Being told you're not at the level.
But let's go back further. Absolutely. Let's go back to your 12-month-old or your 18-month-year-old. Where they're not worried about exam results. They don't know about those sort of things. But the structure and the security that they have in their world, their little world at that time, is building resilience, or isn't it? And
what I'm trying to say is,
am I missing your point?
Yeah, the resilience bit doesn't matter because that's perception, as we were saying with Nadine. You could perceive something different to me. The bit that's constant that people who have resilience have are loving families, whether you're a child or adults. This network of people that seems to be the constant of resilient people.
Yes. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Not necessarily. You still get people with. Sorry, I seem to be disagreeing with everybody today. It's not like me at all.
Great, Jenny, we love it.
You get people who tick all the boxes that should make them resilient. You get people who come from loving families, who are given all the right feedback and do not face major adversity, or do face major adversity. And it's not necessarily, although it may generally be, a predictor of whether they're going to be resilient or not. And I think in some ways, resilience almost takes that childhood stuff a step further, because I think that if you bring up your child to be wrapped in cotton wool, to do things for them, to not necessarily let them make their own decisions at a very young age, I take risks, all the things that are the building blocks of resilience, I think, are essential for children from a very young age to be exposed to. And I suspect, although I've got no scientific proof, that lack of that challenge, risk-taking, putting yourself out there as a child is more likely to make people more rigid and less resilient as they get older.
I don't think you're disagreeing, though, are you? What you're describing is a set of traits, a set of traits that, given a fair wind, means that you could be resilient. Without those, you're unlikely to be. However, that doesn't take into account two other things: the environment those traits live in, and we talked about, the relationships, the family, your view of the world, which aren't really traits, they're perceptions. And then the fact that, do you know what? Depending on the adversity, we could be at the bottom. We could be the dysfunctional bit where we can't get over it, or some people might come out in the thriving bit. I think all you're saying is, have you got a toolbox to help you deal with resilience that looks like the traits? I think sometimes the adversity is too great for people with those traits. I mean, look at COVID. I mean, imagine any business, talking about business resilience now, how would they have planned for COVID? How did they get prepared for this? And I'll bet you they've got elements of resilience and redundancy, if you like, in terms of their working. So I don't think it's a panacea, if that's the right way.
We've talked a lot about family and relationships and how we can construct resilience. There's one thing we've not talked about as I was listening to you and being very quiet, Nick. I've been very quiet. There is one thing we've not mentioned: culture. The role of culture in building resilience. Do you think that it has something to play here? Living in, coming from culture and the influence that it's having on building your resilience. The notion of class as well. Whether you're a working class or the gender, age group, generation. I mean, we've got 15 minutes left, and I'm bringing that on the table. But I just want to widen the discussion a little bit here. Just to...
Well, we talked about having those innate adaptive systems, like from evolution. Culture is one of them. Yeah. But I think, what we are resilient in dealing with, very different. Imagine, like the social media comments on young people and how resilient they would have to be to go through that. That probably doesn't apply to us. So I think there is something about where you are in life that means maybe the resilience is altered a little bit, or I don't think the adversity is linked to age, though. I think it depends on how you perceive the event. If you put a lot of stall in, I don't know, Twitter or Facebook, and someone said something particularly bad about you, that might affect you quite badly. I mean, I couldn't care less. But if you like, the event's the same. It's just the perception that's different.
I think that I don't know. I mean, I've looked at orphans, kids who don't have parents, and I've done some reading on that. And actually, there is a school of thought that says that some of those kids actually can be very resilient later on in their life because of what they've experienced. So, I mean, research also says that being resilient can come from, your genes, it's genetic, part of it is genetic, part of it is your experience, part of it is how you've been brought up, part of it is then what you become and what you make of it and your self-awareness. I think we're back on to it's a journey, isn't it? And you can accelerate that journey or you can slow it down. It's interesting. I come back to what Jeremy was saying, that he seemed to suggest that as you're growing older, you're perhaps less resilient. And I don't know about that. I think it depends on people. It's very personal. Yeah.
Some science says this notion of protection factors, which is people, places, and things. And the risk factors are the events and the things that cause the stress. Yes. And what we need to do is to use the protective factors to help people, make them feel safe in combat, the risks. So I think if it's people, places, and things, it's not time related, is it? You can have those in whatever stage of your life you have.
So we've got 15 minutes left. And we want to give some strategies to people at the end of the LinkedIn Live. So for the moment, I've written down 2, listening to your positive voices or 2 positive voices. Be realistic about what you can and can't do. What else can we add to that so that people, take something away from what we've been talking about?
It's about the control, isn't it? And it's linked to both the points that you've made. It's about focusing on the things that you can control and letting the other things, it's like the negative voices, to try and bypass the things that you can't control and focus on the things that you can control. And actually do more than focus, actually make your plans based on that. I'm stuck we're on lockdown here, I'm stuck inside. What can I do? Well, I've got the countryside on my doorstep. I can go out and have a long walk. I can't go into town and buy anything that's not essential. But that doesn't matter for now because I'll do something else rather than dwelling on the fact, I really miss going to John Lewis or trite examples. But it's about the control, isn't it?
Yeah. Any example on how we can grow our resilience, Jan?
Well, I was going to link the control that Jenny just mentioned to sounds a bit formal, but almost an audit of our social capital. I think our social capital has been, and what I mean by social capital, if I understand it correctly, is it basically who to call when you get in trouble, isn't it? Really, who you can, who you know to call on, and so I think doing a I don't mean an official audit, but you know what I mean. It's kind of being aware of what the contacts are that you've got are, what the support mechanisms are, who will give. And I think that probably links with culture as well a little. I was fascinated by what you're suggesting there. The phrase we used to hear quite a lot, it takes a village to raise a child. And that's absolutely true in certain villages. I'm not sure it's true of many villages in the UK at this particular day and age, because people are very frightened of letting their little Johnny going down to play in the playground because of who else might be there. And I think we've lost in a way that aspect. But I'm sure there's certain cultures that where that's really a key bit of social capital. So my thing is connect with your social capital. There you go.
Okay.
Can I just put a more positive spin on that, Jan? Because what you're saying about taking a village to raise a child. I live in, it's probably a suburb of Newcastle. It's not particularly posh. There's some quite deprived areas around here, and I'm on a local. I actually went onto Facebook, but there's a local Facebook group, and Halloween comes, and I've stuck some sweets on the fence outside. I'll replace them every hour. Please help yourself to flowers, and they're decorating the bus shelter, and the whole community is supporting each other. They may not be raising each other's children, but there's a real awareness of people who are more vulnerable than you are, and actually coming together and doing something about it. And to me, that's the positive voices side of the negativity of being locked in.
Yes, I agree with that.
And linking it to what you were saying about the social capital.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick, go.
Yeah,
I would say grow your optimistic perception, because people being nice and helping you is nice. What we need is people to be aware of what resilience is and how to grow it, and people that haven't got it need to start recognizing it and what it can do for them, and then start looking for it. So on that, I'd say welcome stress, take on the challenges of your life, learn from your mistakes, be compassionate to other people, try to rebound from failure, but not that you always will, but that your first point of call should be, I can rebound from this, and I should look for that. And then what they probably don't do is then enjoy your accomplishments. You know, the rebound doesn't have to be huge. It could be tiny, but if you don't recognize that you did rebound and that that's an accomplishment and you put it in the bank, you can't like do the next one. But that is all about self-perception around resilience, I think.
Yeah, self-awareness. I think that last one, just to butt in, I think that's fantastic. That be aware of where, you know, the learning and the progress you've made. I think that's really good. Yeah.
Celebrating what's going well, actually, you know, pressing pause and just say, this is really great.
Yeah.
And
there was two other, some guy
someone's frozen.
Saw,
is it me?
Some guy I saw said, ask yourself the question, and it is what I'm doing, thinking and feeling right now helping me or anyone else in any way? If the answer is no, ask yourself, what's the point of thinking or feeling like this? Because it serves no purpose and there's no need for it. I mean, someone else said to me, do you know what? If you feel like there's an action plan for your problem, then you haven't got a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's back to that thing. You don't have to solve everything. One step forward in the right direction is often all it takes. But you have to take it.
It's not so much about solving it, because it's much bigger than that, isn't it? And you're absolutely right, Nick. And sometimes the hardest step to take is that first step, that first positivity. Once you've acknowledged where you are and the situation that you're in, what's the one thing I can do that will make my situation better? Because you don't need a whole list of things. You need one thing just to move you that one step, and then the next step will become easier.
Or maybe people like us who do know about resilience could maybe look for other people and like maybe suggest to them to take that first step. You know, to say, look, we get it. We can stand next to you. You can step forward with somebody. You know, if you leave it to the individual, I think that's very difficult to do sometimes.
I think, I mean, for me, it is two things. I have a personal mantra that keeps me going when things don't go my way, which is everything happens for a good reason. So when it doesn't go my way, I say that to myself. I am almost on automatic pilot. So it's happening for a good reason, move on. Bang, I move on. So I am a robot almost, where I have no feelings. I just move on. And the other thing is, I quite like to be proactive. So some of the things that we've discussed about is as a response to you know, adversity, conflict, trauma, and all of that. And I like to be proactive. So, for example, I try something new. I change the way I do things. So I almost beat what's going to happen, so that I am resilient before it happens. And I'm quite interested in foreseeing what's going to happen, so that I am better equipped. So for me, it's those two things. Yes, Jenny?
Can I just add something to that? Because I've known you for some years, and we've worked together in all sorts of quite challenging situations. And I can absolutely verify that you say that, but you not only say that, but you say it with such conviction that I believe you. So it's not, you don't just say it for yourself, you say it for whoever it is you're talking to as well. And it's a fact. It's not just your opinion, it's a fact. And that's the way you say it. And that's actually really helpful and calming.
Oh, thank you, Jenny.
Maybe just quickly to give business a poke in the right direction.
Yeah.
I read something yesterday. It said maybe business should move away and consider things that aren't about hyper efficient, hyper lean. Start considering the unexpected rather than expecting, profits to rise next year. Things can change. And I think maybe this COVID-19 experience has made people think, do you know what? It's not always going to be business as usual. My time in the army, I didn't learn a huge amount, I didn't think, until I thought about this. My boss used to say to me every week, sit down for 20 minutes with a cup of tea. Just tell me what things might go wrong, what you're going to do about them, just in case they do. And they never did. But you wonder whether that sort of thinking in this climate is not wasted.
Very good.
So far we have listening to positive voices, be realistic about what you can and can't do, focus on what you can control, do an audit of social capital, so who we can call on, grow your own your optimistic perception, learn from your mistakes, enjoy your accomplishments, celebrate. Everything is happening for a good reason. So a personal mantra, do something different, something new every day. So growth mindset. I had put 10, we've got 9.
Oh. I would add to that about something about self-care, because I think that if you're not resilient, there's all sorts of negative feelings that you've got that might be about you being a failure because something hasn't gone right. And I think creating a healthy mindset, about maybe having a routine, maybe eating healthily, going to bed at a reasonable time, making sure that you communicate with somebody. So I think that there's a whole range of things that you can do in terms of self-care that will enable you to be stronger in your outlook and perhaps be more resilient.
I think that leads nicely to Nadine's bit. I had it, don't ruminate. There is no need for you to attach a negative emotion to an event. That it's you that does that. You don't have to do that.
It's a choice.
The event, not you.
Yeah.
It's everything we do is, everything we do, a lot of things that we do is a choice. And sometimes we choose to be, unconsciously perhaps we are stuck. It's because of what we, when you do the self-talk, it's about what you say to yourself. And
you don't have to be a saint.
No.
Just say people, I don't think like this all the time. Nadine had to slap me this week to sort of say, glass half full.
Yeah.
So everyone slips.
Yes. Yes, but that's
a virtual slap, though, isn't it?
That's the importance of having friends around you and knowing where to go.
That's your social capital.
Yeah, which is exactly what you said, Jan. And I think that with what's happened over the past 6 months, that's exactly what we for. We call ourselves those 4 people. That's exactly what we've done. And we've actually not only survived, but we've thrived on it, because every week we come back to LinkedIn Live. And actually, we're quite excited to do it, aren't we? Yes. We're having a good discussion. And we're hopefully influencing, some people around the world with little tips and strategies. And we feel we're making a little bit of a difference. And I think it's great. Not what we had anticipated that we would do, but we're doing it, and not everything has to be planned. And that's me who's saying that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Can I chuck one more in at the 11th minute? It came out of something that you said. It's this notion of resolving stuckness. I think this is so important in schools, for kids learning in schools. What do you do when you get stuck? But I think it takes us through. It's got to be present in adult life as well. How you respond when you're stuck is absolutely crucial, and that's your way out of the resilience paper bag, isn't it? What you do. Yeah, and I think that probably links to that could be the thing linking to a number of those boxes, actually.
Yes, it's good, and actually that could be another LinkedIn Live theme topic.
Yes,
that we
resolving stuckness.
I like the concept of a resilience paper bag. I like think my visual image.
Well, it's getting out of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do one on change, maybe. You know, a lot of things we're talking about is the tools, but that means you're in a different position, and we're talking about new positions. You know, how do you move into a new position? It's quite interesting.
How do you manage change? I mean, I talk about it all the time with the people I work with.
I've done a lot on change as well.
In very different ways. So how do we manage change would be a fantastic LinkedIn Live, perhaps next week.
Maybe.
Okay.
Tasnim is saying something. She's saying, wonderful discussion. Jan, do you want to take this?
Yes, well, Tasnim's saying Tasnim, it's lovely to have you with us. Tasnim's saying it's a wonderful discussion. Those four people. I'm glad you loved it, Tasnim. It's been brilliant taking part.
It's quite frustrating to get all these comments and not being able to respond to them. We can pick up the chat, but we can't actually respond to each question. And there's lots of stuff that's come through today that would have been really nice to respond to. But thanks anyway for the people who have stuff in.
Absolutely. It's been really
because that's really added to the to what we talked about. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the positive comment, Tasnim. It's lovely.
And I think it would be fair to share with the world what we do after, once we finish the LinkedIn Live. We actually don't switch off. We talk for about 20 minutes to reflect on how we've done. We don't measure our performance, but we looked at how. Well, I do.
Nadine measures our performance.
Of course I do. Right. We looked at performance. I look at their performance then. Okay. We reflect on the flow of the conversation, and we reflect on the equality. Last week we talked about were we talking for the same amount of time? Are we interrupting each other? Because that's something we've been looking at. So it's the before where we just plug in, go LinkedIn Live, we talk, but it's also the after where we reflect. And we work in education. We've always been reflective practitioner, and will continue to be. So for the next 20 minutes, we'll go live and offline, and we will go and reflect. But we will be back next week, same time, 4:00, and we will be focusing on change management. That's a really good one. I'm really looking forward to that.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And good evening and good night to wherever you are in the world.